Hi, everyone. We are back with our new set, so hopefully you can see me in slightly sharper focus, which is more than I can say for the California governor's race. It is wide open. There are 61 candidates running to replace Governor Gavin Newsom, who is term limited. All of them are on the same ballot. Under California's system, the top two vote getters will advance to the general. It could be two Democrats, it could be two Republicans. We don't know. This is not a normal political primary. It's more like a political stress test. California is close to my heart because I was born here, but it is also one of the most important states in the nation as a laboratory for new policy ideas. California is also the fourth largest economy in the world. We have a larger economy here in California than anywhere except all of the US, China, or Germany. Its economy is much larger than Texas or New York, in case you were wondering. And we also send more tax dollars to the federal government than we get back in support from the federal government. We are an economic powerhouse. Reforms here in California also shape national policy on climate, technology, agriculture, abortion, immigration, and culture. But California is also home to some of the nation's most visible failures. We have the highest cost of living adjusted poverty rate in America, a severe housing affordability crisis, and nearly a quarter of the nation's homeless population. And this is the California contradiction: enormous wealth, enormous opportunity, enormous dysfunction. One of the people asking voters to let him lead this and help find our way out of the wilderness on some issues is Tom Steyer, climate activist, billionaire investor, former presidential candidate, and now candidate for governor of California. Tom, thank you so much for being here today. It's wonderful to meet you.
Jessica, thank you very much for having me on.
So let's just start jumping right in. You are positioned in this race as a progressive, but you also frame yourself as sort of an ethical billionaire. Many progressives say that that's a contradiction, no such thing. So, why should California see you as a solution to the inequality that we struggle with here rather than a beneficiary of the system that created it?
Well, let me say this, Jessica. You are describing this race as very confusing, 61 candidates, very unclear, kind of a big high school food fight. Actually, this race is pretty simple. In this race, there is one candidate who is pushing for real change. Of course, it's about affordability, but pushing for real change on behalf of working people who can't afford to live here against the corporate special interests that run this state. That is the progressive candidate. It's me. And there's a way that it's true. Don't take my word for it. They are spending a record, the big corporations and billionaires are spending a record amount of money ever against a California candidate, against me in this race, because they know that I am going to take on the electric monopoly, the oil and gas people who are gouging us at the pump, that I am going to build houses and drive down the cost of housing, and that I'm for single payer healthcare. And they know that that's true. So in every one of those instances, there's a big corporate special interest spending money to try and stop me. And the other side that makes this clear, it's kind of like, who's against me. Working people are for me. The teachers are for me. The nurses are for me. The home care workers are for me. The people who work in cafeterias, the people who work in schools are for me. So are all the environmentalists. So are the progressives. So actually, this race is pretty straightforward, which is there's one candidate who is pushing for structural change in multiple places, and that the corporate special interests and billionaires are opposing. And there's one candidate who's not taking their money and who is willing to take them down. And I have a history of taking them on and taking them down. And so this race is, do you want to change or not? And if you want to change, there's only one game in town.
I want to get into some of your policy positions that are into structural change. But before we do that, I just want to acknowledge that you are running to lead the largest Democratic state in the nation at a time that we have a president who is targeting blue states and challenging blue state governors in ways we really haven't seen in our lifetime. Can you name one specific thing that you would do as governor to confront Trump that Gavin Newsom has not done or would not do?
Well, let me start with ICE. I've said I think ICE is a criminal organization, that it should be abolished, but I'm aware that the governor of California doesn't get to do that. But I've said I'll prosecute ICE agents for racial profiling because it's illegal in California. I've said I'd prosecute ICE agents for using violence against California, and we'll go up the chain as far as it takes us to Stephen Miller if necessary, if people are being sent there to commit violence. I've said we will investigate the detention centers. Clearly, crimes are being committed there and they're closed off, but they're in California, and the state of California has a right to investigate them. And we'll have a well-funded legal defense fund for people who've been kidnapped or people who are under threat of deportation. So in answer to your question, when it comes to what's going on, to the attack, the illegal attack on immigrants in the state of California, I believe that I'm going further than Governor Newsom has. I believe that it's necessary. I believe that the job of a California governor is in many ways to stand between danger, between violence, between powerful interests that are trying to hurt Californians or rig the system. That's the governor's job. That's what I intend to do.
President Trump has threatened to withhold important federal funds from states that take action against ICE, specifically billions in federal highway and emergency funds for any state that refuses to comply. How would you get California's safety net funded if you took this noble cause of challenging ICE in this way and the feds withhold crucial money?
Jessica, let's be clear. The feds are already withholding critical money. The fires in Altadena and Pacific Palisades were last January. We are owed $54 billion, which we have not gotten. He is saying he's going to take $1.3 billion away from Medi-Cal based on unspecified corruption. If you're worried about whether Donald Trump is trying to hurt Californians, stop worrying about it. He is. This is a very clear attempt by the Trump administration, by Trump himself, to hurt the people who he sees as a threat. And that's us.
So what do you do to fill in that gap?
Look, if you look at my policies, I'm the one person in this state who said, look, I've said on day one, I'll push for a special election to close a corporate tax loophole that's worth $20 billion. That's one thing we'll do to close the gap. Second of all, I've said we will tax. There's something called Water's Edge, which is a crazy corporate loophole that will also close. I've said if you look at our AI policy, it starts with protecting workers, but it also says we can't have a California innovation that makes 12 trillionaires and puts millions of Californians out of work and do nothing about it. And I've said it's critical for California that we have a fee for every calculation done by an artificial intelligence companies to use that money to protect workers and, if necessary, to help support the care economy, which I know
we're going to get to. Yeah.
I'm not trying to hurry you, but I'm just saying this. You're saying, how are we going to stand up? I'm the only person on the stage. There are really 7 people who have been thought of as serious contenders on the debate stage in the 4 or 5 debates that there have been on TV. They lined us up and said, will you support taxing billionaires? And I said, 6 people said no, and 1 person said yes. And that 1 person was me. I said, billionaires like me should be paying more. I'm the person who wants to make sure that we fund what's necessary in this state. Look, as you said, we have an incredibly high earnings average, but we have the highest poverty rate in the United States of America. We are somewhere in the 30s in terms of the effectiveness of our school system. For such a rich state with such a long heritage of great education, I'm sitting here going like, that's not acceptable. We're going to have to redress some of these things. I'm talking about shared prosperity. I know we need prosperity if we're going to share it. I'm a practical person who built a big business from scratch. But I want to say this. It's not okay to have this kind of wealth disparity. It's not okay to be failing tens of millions of Californians at the same time the state is creating almost unimaginable wealth.
Okay, let's get into some of those issues. I want to ask you first about an issue that's close to a lot of the people in this audience's heart, which is abortion. California is an abortion sanctuary state, as you know. Your campaign website lists 10 core priorities. It covers everything from AI to abolishing ICE. but reproductive freedom is not on that list. I'm curious to know why not, and if anti-abortion states or a Trump administration tries to restrict abortion pills or punish California providers for providing them, what would you do beyond what the state is already doing?
Look, I'm 100% for reproductive rights. I think probably the only reason it isn't in our list of policies is because in California, we assume women have the right to choose. And that's something that is critical. You make a great point, though, Jessica, which is in the rest of the United States, this is very much up for grabs. Absolutely, we should be supporting a woman's right to choose in California in every way, in every instance, in the courts, in whatever we have to do. This is not something that we're equivocal about. This, women's right to choose is healthcare. I believe healthcare is a right. I believe women have a absolute moral authority over their own bodies. And the idea that this administration or another state wants to determine what happens in California. Look, Steve Hilton has said that he would extradite California doctors to Louisiana to be criminally prosecuted under Louisiana law for performing an abortion in California. That is what I call nuts, just nuts. But absolutely, this is a state that believes in a woman's right to choose. I absolutely believe in it. This is not a close call. And we absolutely, you're asking me, we have to stand up to people who try to take away our liberty. We have to stand up for ourselves. I got 8 million signatures to impeach Donald Trump in 2017 and 2018. I have no illusions about what he is. So absolutely, this is the only reason it's not in there, it's sort of like, what else isn't in there? The right to breathe. Woman's right to choose is a given in the state of California, and it will remain a given, and it will be protected by me as governor without any qualifications.
And your point about Steve Hilton, for folks who don't know, not only is he saying that this doctor could be extradited to another state to stand trial for giving abortion pills, he said it's because he wants to respect the laws of that state. California has a shield law. It's our own law that says you may not do that. So it's absolutely wild. And I do remember you were one of the earliest people calling for Trump's impeachment, and you put your money behind that really early before a lot of people were ready to do that. I remember that.
It pissed off the Democratic Party too, Jessica. They felt like they had this under control. Why are you muddying the waters? Look, you're asking me, Tom, do you think it's worth to stand up for our values? Do we have principles that we don't sell out for money? Well, let me say this, Jessica. I don't know how you felt about it, but I've watched the big corporations in America sell out for money across the board. And that makes me ill. That is not leadership. Leadership is explaining to people what we're trying to accomplish in the world and consistently going from it and not letting bullies push us around.
So let's get into some of the details, because I know you have a lot of very heavy policy specifics around making life more affordable. You're out with a new plan that's going to expand care for Californians. As I understand it, you want to ensure childcare for all Californians and improve pay for home care for the elderly. Tell me what I've gotten right and wrong, and how are you going to pay for this?
Okay. You're right. What I've said, childcare in California is like $3,000 a month. It is a gigantic expense for every young working family. And there are 2 million families in California that qualify for childcare subsidies, and only 16% of them get them.
Wait, how many? 1.6?
0.16, 16%.
Whoa.
So it's close to 1 out of 6, actually, if you do the math.
Right.
So let me say this. In this state, I'm talking about the need to provide care so that people can go to work, so that, so that parents can work and not spend all of the money they earn from work giving to the child care provider that they're, leaving in charge of their children. And that is something that's critical. I'm also talking about home care, the in-home. There are 800,000 in-home service providers in the state of California. And let me say this, I've gone to visit some of them. And it is one of the most difficult jobs I can imagine doing. It is absolutely incredibly demanding. Those people make very low wages. They don't get benefits. It is a crisis situation, and they provide amazing, important service in California, very skilled service for a very low cost. If you look at the cost of a nursing home room in California, so a single for a year, right now, $182,000.
Wow.
Kind of mind blowing. And what I'm saying is this.
That's not high end. That's just basic.
Yeah. And so what I'm saying, but a single room, but what I'm saying is, look, in-home services, caring for elderly people, disabled people at home is incredibly important. Those people support me and I support them. They are doing incredibly hard jobs at a price that is incredibly good for the state of California. They're doing jobs that no one else can do. And so to a large extent, what I'm saying is this, we need to support the people who are providing the care from little kids all the way through seniors. And
so you're proposing ensuring they get better pay and better.
And the childcare, that subsidized childcare is available to more than 1 out of 6 families that merits it.
So you want to get, first of all, this is a key to unlocking sort of equality across the board, because women have to work and also end up bearing the load of childcare and home responsibilities, and are the sandwich generation, also taking care of the adults, right? Your parents and your kids. So all of this is sort of one of those things where California could be on the cutting edge of vital reform, but it always comes down to the details, which is, how do you pay for it? How do you get it to happen?
Well, let me say 2 things about this.
Okay.
Look, I've said on day one, I will call a special election and we will get rid of a corporate tax loophole called split roll, which you probably know, which is worth about $20 billion a year to the state of California. I've said we will go after another tax loophole for California corporations called Water's Edge that's worth about $4 or $5 billion. More than that, I've said on day one, we will start moving towards single payer. If you look at the care economy, the cost of healthcare has been growing at twice the rate of inflation for 50 years. And it is eating up this state. It's eating up families. It's eating up businesses that have to pay for healthcare and then have to compete with people from other states. And it's eating up the budget of the state of California. And we have to move. It's the money. Single payer costs about, on average, half as much as we're paying as a state. And so we don't really have a choice. If we're going to be able to deliver healthcare as a right, which I believe it is for every Californian, we're going to have to drop that cost. And between that and I have other revenue. I'm the only person running for governor who talks about revenues. Everybody talks about what they're going to spend. No one talks about the question you're asking, which I think is a totally fair question. How are you going to pay for that? And I'm talking very specifically about very specific revenue generation that we have written down, that's on our website, to say this is how we're going to pay for it.
So the follow-up that's obvious is, how do you get it done? Because a lot of these issues these taxes that you're proposing have actually gone before the public as initiatives, or people don't know how California works, but the public has had a chance to vote, or before the legislature, and they have not passed. Single payer is something the legislature has investigated and said, oh, it's going to be too complicated, we can't do it. So why is it going to be any different when you show up saying this should get done than everything that's come before?
So let me say this, and I don't know if you know my history, Jessica, so I will say it, assuming that if you do, that most of your viewers don't.
Yes,
Look,
go for it.
3 times I've gone to the ballot box against super powerful, well-funded corporate interests. And every time the Democratic establishment has said, I know you're low IQ, but I can't believe you're stupid enough to do this. And every time we've won by a lot. So for instance, we took on the oil companies in 2010, and everyone said, you're seriously a fool. George Shultz and I co-chaired, and George always said, and George, who's passed, was 89 years old at the time, he said, Tom, we're not going to beat the oil companies. We're going to smash the oil companies. and we got about 70% of the vote. We took on the tobacco companies that the legislator had failed to get action against for 20 years, and we easily passed that legislation. And we took on out-of-state corporations that weren't paying fair income tax in the state of California, and we creamed them. So let me say this. I know that other people have failed at the ballot box, but I've done it 3 times successfully in California out of 3, and I've done it 3 times successfully outside California out of 3.
So that means you'll fund campaigns to do this, like ad campaigns and initiative campaigns, or?
This is a proposition. We're going to have to win it, and it's going to take money to do it. And so that, you can't undo something that was passed by the people unless you go back to the people. So we're going to have to go back to the people. That's okay. This is a laydown as to whether we need the money. It's a loophole. Should Disney be paying taxes, real estate taxes on Disneyland based on 1970s values? I would go with no. They're making tens or hundreds of billions of dollars a year. Why do they have a complete tax loophole that they clearly don't need or deserve?
Let me ask you a quick one about AI. I know you have an AI policy, and if we had more time, I'd ask you to really get into it. I want to ask you specifically about data centers. I think there's been a debate about whether there should be a moratorium on them or not. I think that you've told Greenpeace you think there should be a moratorium, but then now you're saying maybe there should not be.
Let me say, I don't think,
go ahead.
I have not changed my position on this at all. What I've said consistently about data centers is that data centers should have to justify themselves every single time for the community. So if you take a step back, these data centers are being built for some of the most valuable companies in the world. The lousy ones are worth hundreds of billions of dollars. You're going into a community of middle class or working class or rural people, and you're going to get takes a lot of electricity. You cannot be allowed to drive up their electric rates by a penny. You cannot. That's not fair. You have hundreds of billions or trillions of dollars, and you're going to start screwing working people on their electricity rates. I don't think that's fair. Second of all, they take a massive amount of water, because if you think about them, they're big machines running multiple hundreds of billions of computations, and that makes the machine heat up. In order to cool the machine, you need water. You cannot, if you think about how water is used in the state of California, 80% of it is used by farms and ranches. You have to irrigate. And a farm or a ranch without water is worthless. It's not worth a penny. You can't raise crops and you can't raise animals without water. So you cannot allow hundreds of billions or trillions of dollars company to go in and steal water that farms and ranches need. This has got to be something that the community agrees to is in their interest. So that's not a moratorium, but it's an absolute rule.
So you would put it to a vote of the local community?
I would make sure that maybe it's the community's representatives, but to a very large extent, it has to be. You can't be stealing the water from people, and you can't be raising electric rates. And basically, that is a rule.
But how would they get water? I mean, I guess you'd say the community would decide they could take the water, because they're going to need water.
Would buy it.
Buy it. Oh.
There is this thing. Look, from my standpoint.
Yeah.
People would think, how much of this water can we spare? What is the price for it? You guys can't come in here. Water in the West is it's an incredible short supply. The Great American Desert. In California, it's absolutely critical in terms of in the valley we grow some of the best food in the whole world, but we have to ship water around to do it. And there's a huge issue between surface water, which is streams, and groundwater, which is aquifers, and how exactly to control who owns the water, who gets to use the water. And so in every one of these instances, we can't have corporations ripping off working people. They
could buy it.
The campaign is about standing up to corporations that are trying to rig the system and take advantage of working people. And this is a perfect example. That can't be allowed to happen.
Okay, I want to ask you a big picture question, because I know it's our last minutes, and I really want to make sure you have a chance to speak about this. You are promising aggressive climate action and a confrontation with ICE. But in your past, when you were an investor at a hedge fund, You generated a lot of wealth by investing in fossil fuels and in private prisons. And I ask about this not because people ask you how you made money. I ask because the choice of what to invest in is also a bet on which industries should grow. And when you invest in fossil fuels and private prisons, you're promoting their power in society. So why wasn't that a moral problem for you then, if it is now?
So let me talk about private prisons, if you don't mind, Jessica, which is,
Please.
look, 22 years, we own hundreds or thousands of stocks. In 22 years ago, we bought stock in a private prison company. And 21 years ago, I realized it was a mistake morally. And we sold it. But I didn't just sell it. I didn't just say I made a mistake and move on. If you look and see, we have worked, that was a time of mass racist incarceration in the state of California. I have worked for rehabilitative justice ever since, very seriously. What does that look like? Well, first of all, we have 20 people in Sacramento pushing for progressive policies for the last 11 years. It's looked like bail reform. We've worked to end any relationship that the state of California has with private prison companies. We have worked to decertify officers who misbehave. We have worked against sentence enhancements, which are automatic increases in sentences for people in certain categories. We have worked very consistently for rehabilitative justice, for treatment, for preparing people who are incarcerated to go back into society, to be productive, to be employed, and not to recidivate, which is a fancy word for committing a crime and going back to prison.
Right.
And as a result of this, and we've done this for a long time, the strongest rehabilitative justice organization in the state of California is called Smart Justice. They have endorsed me. They have not endorsed anyone else. They are strong supporters of me because I did make a mistake. And I didn't just recognize it and stop, which I did well over 20 years ago. I actually did something about it to more than put back into the system what I recognized was a mistake. And so, the whole point about rehabilitative justice is you can make a mistake and you can rehabilitate yourself. You can change and do it. And that is, if you'll excuse my saying so, exactly what I've done. And we have pushed really hard on this in a lot of ways that I'm not telling you about, because the truth is I recognize, and it's a big reason that I left my investment firm that I started, and I left billions of dollars on the table without any doubt. And I did it because I felt like, no, this is a value system that I don't agree with. And I need to be in a value system where everything I do, I can back up and feel good about. And that's exactly why I walked away from it 15 years ago. And it's exactly why I'm running for governor. And it's exactly what I've done in between. So yes, look, I'm not a perfect person. I definitely made a mistake. And let me say this in terms of the fossil fuel stuff.
Yeah.
Or I realized that we own fossil fuel like we owned every single industry. I have worked incredibly hard on climate, environment, and environmental justice. Go look. The Sierra Club endorses me. Every environmentalist in the state of California, the United States of America, is endorsing me. The truth is, I have put in an enormous amount of time and effort to push California and the country towards a much different clean, and clean energy is much cheaper. It's not, I've always said, I'm not going to ever ask someone to make a sacrifice for clean energy. What we need to do is make sure it's a better deal, and it is.
Well, I would love to have you back another time to talk about how you break up the energy monopolies and your strategy for California on that. So let's do that another day when you have some time.
I'd love that. Listen, I always think when you really know a topic, you can get very simple about it. And then if someone goes, okay, here's your 30,000 foot view. What's your 10,000 foot view? And here it is. And what's your 5 foot view? And here it is. I definitely want to do that with you in energy.
Great. Let me just give you an opportunity to say, why are you optimistic about California and America right now? Because a lot of the people you're talking to right now feel really, frankly, depressed about the state of our nation and our future.
So let me say this about California. I go around California. I look more people in the eye than anybody else running for governor by far. And let me tell you, it's amazingly reassuring. The people of California, who are incredibly diverse, are also incredibly, amazingly great. And so when I look at this state, I see the state that's half the growth of the whole country. I see the most dynamic economy in the world. I see the diversity, which I consider to be a magnificent factor about California. We're the most beautiful state. Every part of it seems to me to be incredible. And so when you say, why am I? Look, we have the money to solve all these problems. We need to absolutely take on the corporate special interests and the billionaires who are fighting us. But this is a state that is succeeding wildly. It's just not sharing things fairly. And so when I talk about shared prosperity, we have prosperity on average. We're not sharing it. And we need to recognize that building a just society is also something that every one of those corporations and every one of those billionaires should take great pride in, that we're showing the 21st century what a successful society looks like. That's what we're trying to do. And if we can do that, doesn't that sound like fun? And I'm not teasing. Doesn't that sound like great?
Tom Steyer, thank you so much for your time today and for your energy on the campaign trail. It is very nice to talk to somebody who has very serious policies and really willing to shake things up.
Thank you very much, Jessica. Thank you for having me. And I look forward to the return engagement.
Great. Me too. Take
Okay.
care. Well, everyone, that was Tom Steyer running for governor of California. I think one of the interesting things about this campaign is California is often considered a progressive laboratory of new policies that get rolled out in this state and then filter out through the rest of the nation. And one of the reasons it's important for the whole nation to pay attention to this race is because it often plays that role. He has laid out just some of his proposals and policies. As he said, I'm sure if you're interested, you can go more. We'll link to his website so you can see the policies there. I have extended invitations to other people running in this race, and hopefully you'll have a chance to hear from them as well. If anybody watching this has a relationship with somebody who is, one of the top 5 polling placers in this race and wants to get them on, please let me know. We will be open to having them. Thanks so much, and let me know what you think of the new setup. Okay, I'll see you soon.